like to turn the proceedings over to Debbie Fisher, an OCE board member and Executive Vice President of Mount Sinai Hospital, to introduce our keynote speaker. But ladies and gentlemen, please join me in one more round of applause for the Premier.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to introduce our keynote speaker for this year's Discovery. It's especially exciting as Dr. Peter Diamandis is making a rare speaking appearance in Canada. Many of you who are familiar with his background will know that he has left a trail of disruptive innovation in his path. He is perhaps best known for his role as X Prize founder and chairman. The mission of the X Prize Foundation is creating large incentive prizes to drive radical breakthroughs beneficial to humanity. His closest advisors and board members read like a who's who of way out-of-the-box thinkers: film director James Cameron, entrepreneur Elon Musk, Google co-founder Larry Page, and inventor Ray Kurzweil. He has degrees in molecular genetics and aerospace engineering from MIT, and his MD from Harvard Medical School. As co-founder, along with Ray Kurzweil, who is a past Discovery keynote speaker and chairman of the Singularity University, a Silicon Valley-based institution partnered with NASA, Google, Autodesk, and Nokia, Dr. Diamandis counsels some of the world's top enterprises in exponential technologies. Dr. Diamandis is also recognized as a leader in the commercial space arena, having founded and run Zero Gravity Corporation, the Rocket Racing League, and Space Adventures. He was one of the founding members of the International Space University, including Canadian Bob Richards. He is also a New York Times bestseller with his new book called Abundance: The Future is Better Than You Think. We are thrilled that Dr. Diamandis has brought his visionary insights on innovation, technology, and business to Discovery. Welcome, Dr. Diamandis.
Thank you,
Over
Debbie.
to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie, for that kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to share with you what I've been passionate about, what I've been learning, what I'm calling innovation and breakthroughs on the road to abundance. First off, let me welcome the International Space University and Singularity graduates who are here in the room. I'm grateful for the support you've given. It turns out that Canada, in particular Ontario, is probably the largest provider of forward-thinking people to both ISU and Singularity University, two of the institutions I had the chance to co-found. So let me begin. I'm going to talk about 3 different subjects here today, and at the end of this, by the way, there's going to be some chance for Q&A. So if there's something that hits a nerve, there's something that excites you, please grab a hold of it and let's have a conversation. That's the fun part at the end of this conversation. So I'm going to open up with a conversation about exponential technologies. What are the technologies that are literally transforming the world and allowing entrepreneurs to have the impact that only governments and large corporations could have 20 years ago? We're then going to move to the idea of crowdsourcing genius. How do you tap into the smartest people around the planet to help you solve your problems? Because if you're dependent upon innovation from inside your company, then you're dead. We're living in a world of 5 billion connected people, and how you tap them is critical. Then finally, from the perspective that I have running a few different organizations, we're going to be talking about the world of abundance. You see, I am someone here who stands and believes that there is no problem that we cannot solve on this planet. Every single challenge we have ahead is solvable. The difficulty when I say that is that most of us have a hard time because we project the past into the future. As humans, we're also very ill-equipped to understand the extraordinary rate of change that we have coming down the road. And I think part of OCE's mission here, part of what we're speaking about here at Discovery, is to give you sort of an intuitive pulse, a gut check about the rate of change. My mom used to say that the world is speeding up. And in fact, it is, in a multitude of different ways. And I think all of us feel this day in and day out. The challenge is that the wetware and the hardware of our brains didn't evolve to understand the kind of change we're having today. You see, the human mind, the human brain evolved on the savannas and the plains of Africa hundreds of thousands and millions of years ago. And we evolved to be what I call a local and a linear thinker. If you think about it, back then, the world would best be described as local. Everything that affected you was within a day's walk. Something happened on the other side of the planet, you knew nothing about it. And it was linear in that from millennium to millennium, century to century, generation to generation, nothing changed, right? The life of your great-grandparents, you, your parents, your grandkids, it was the same. And our bodies, our physicality, over time, Darwinism taught us we adapted to the environment. And so we adapted to this environment. But that's not the way the world is today, right? Today, the world is global and exponential. Something happens in China or India, you know about it seconds later. Your computers know about it microseconds later. Not only does the world change century to century or decade to decade, it's changing year to year. If I were to describe this, I'd put up this chart. The red line, it's us, it's humans. It's our politicians, it's our students, it's our boards of directors, it's all of us. We are linear thinkers. I don't know about you, but I haven't had a software upgrade in a long time, let alone a hardware upgrade. That yellow line there, that exponential growth, is the march of technology. It's the technology we're seeing right next door. It's the technology that all of you are creating, are implementing, are investing in, are passionate about. And it is literally the doubling in the power of computation, of synthetic genomics, of 3D printing, of all these exponentially growing technologies. And the difference between that linear line, us, humans, and that exponential growth is either disruptive stress or disruptive opportunity, depending on your point of view. So I think about this. I think about this a lot. And the wise politicians and what OC is all about, is really making an investment in the disruptive opportunity side of this equation. And I'll give you an example. Here's a company, Kodak. It was a mainstay of the world in photographic equipment. Back in 1996, Kodak was a $28 billion, 140,000 person company, a mainstay of the economic engine of North America. Do you know that Kodak invented the digital camera that put them out of business? They had the patents, they had come up with it first, and they looked at this thing and they said, this digital camera, it's a toy for kids. It takes such low-resolution images. We're Kodak, we take beautiful, high-resolution images. And besides, we're in the paper and chemicals business. What they didn't understand was that the exponential growth of that digitized information would soon outdo everything they possibly could. And in 2012, last year, Kodak goes bankrupt. To put an exclamation point at the end of the sentence, in that same year, another company in the memory business, in the image business, a company called Instagram, is acquired by Facebook for $1 billion with 13 employees. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what I now call the new Kodak moment. When a linear company, a linear thinking company, a company dependent on the old ways of doing business, is displaced by exponential technologies. And we're going to see this over and over and over again. Those companies that do not plug into the world that's exploding, that don't surf on top of this information and technology tsunami, are going to be crushed by it. We're going to see this in every single industry. And the investments that are being made here in Ontario is going to differentiate you from other places that don't make these investments. So I study this. I study exponential technologies. As Debbie introduced me with my co-founder, Ray Kurzweil, considered one of the most brilliant people in the field of AI. We co-founded a university called Singularity University, based in Silicon Valley, along with NASA and Google and Autodesk and Cisco and Genentech. And we study the most powerful technologies in the world. What are the technologies that are doubling in power year on year on year? And what we think about is that the power that these technologies have to impact 1 billion people. So as we incubate entrepreneurs, and as I said, a lot of them from, a lot of them Canadian, a lot of them from Ontario, who come to SU to bring back, start companies, bring them back. Our charge to our entrepreneurs are to begin what we call a 10 to the 9th plus company. Build a company that has the ability to impact the lives of 1 billion people within this decade. Because that's the world we're living in today. Today, using these technologies as an entrepreneur, you have the ability to touch the lives of 1 billion people. And if you have that ability, why wouldn't you play at that level? Why wouldn't you play at that size of a bold and ambitious game plan? And I encourage you to think about that. Because today, the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest opportunities. Want to become a billionaire? Start a company that touches the lives of 1 billion people. And by the way, you get the gratitude of humanity as part of that process as well. So what we teach at Singularity University, what I'm going to speak about today a little bit, is how do you go from being a linear thinker to an exponential one? On one side, it's these exponential technologies, computations, AI, robotics, synthetic biology, 3D printing, digital medicine. Those are the technologies that are growing exponentially. On the other side are what I call exponential tools, exponential organizational tools, incentive competitions, data mining competitions. How do you gamify something? Crowdfunding, DIY communities. These are tools that allow an individual, again, to tap extraordinary capabilities, no matter who you are, no matter where you are. So let me start this journey with you to talk about exponentials. What does exponential growth feel like? Remember I said that as humans, we're intuitively designed, our brains are wired to think linearly. So if I said to any one of you, brought you on stage and said, hey, take 30 linear paces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you could all pretty much project where you're going to be in 30 paces, about 30 meters away. However, if I said to one of you, come on up, join me, now take 30 exponential steps, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. Where are you going to be in 30 exponentials and 30 doublings? Very few of us, unless you have it memorized, realize that you're going to end up 1 billion meters away. Or put differently, you'll have gone around the planet 26 times. And I still feel this, 26 times. I still feel that sort of, that disruptive, that deception, the notion that I can't predict that. And how shocking that is what put Kodak out of business. Because once you're on an exponential growth curve, there is no catching up. If you missed it, you missed it. So how is this affecting us? Number one, we're living in a time of exponential data growth, right? I'm sure many of you are in the data mining business. We're growing at 59% data per year. We're at the knee of the curve. We're living in a time where you can almost know anything you want. The world is becoming instrumented at a rate we can't even conceive of. And how you tap into that information and get answers out of it is extraordinary. Billion-dollar, trillion-dollar opportunities are going to be created out of this data mining. So all of this is made possible by this curve. And I'm sure most of you recognize it, most of you know it. The last portion of this is called Moore's Law. On the bottom here, I've drawn, the last 110 years of computational growth. On the left-hand axis is an exponential log curve that shows how much computational speed you could buy for a $1,000 investment. Taking you back to your high school math here, on a log curve, an exponential is what? It's a straight line, right? But what we see here is that this curve over the last 110 years of computational growth isn't a straight line, it's curving upwards. What it tells me, what it tells us, is that the rate at which computers are getting faster is itself getting faster. The second thing I want to show you on this curve of massively increasing computational power is that on this curve, you don't see World War I or World War II. You can't find the, depression or the recessions of '87 or 2001. What this curve is a result of faster computers being used to build faster computers. And it's pretty much a force of nature that one could pretty much project is going to continue. And if it does, this is what you get. This is a curve from my friend Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity Is Near, which I commend to all of you. And what this curve shows is the following. In 2010, an average computer like all of us have at home that is running this computer, this presentation, was calculating at 10 to the 11th cycles per second, 100 billion calculations in a second, which is still an extraordinary number, more computational power than you know, the US and Canada had in the 60s and 70s. In 2023, just a decade from now, the average $1,000 computer, you can go into any store here in Toronto and buy, that average computer is now going to be calculating at 10 to the 16th cycles per second, which is just a number, unless you talk to a neurophysiologist who will tell you that's the rate at which the brain does pattern recognition. That's the rate at which your visual and auditory cortex understands what you hear and what you see. So what happens when your average computer is now thinking as fast as the human mind? And it doesn't stop there, does it? Because another 25 years later, the average $1,000 laptop is now calculating at the rate of the entire human race. What happens then? Well, I know your kids' homework gets a lot easier. But how is that going to affect your companies, your businesses? What opportunities is it going to create for you? How is it going to change the fundamentals of every aspect of government, of industry, of education, of healthcare? Because it will. We are on the brink of wholesale change in everything we're doing, not 50 years from now, this decade. For the entrepreneurs here, I know as a fellow entrepreneur, and I've had the pleasure of starting about 15 companies, you're thinking, yeah, that's fantastic. I'm like all over that. For the people who are traditionally running billion-dollar companies, they're like, I better retire before that stuff starts happening. So these are a few covers of magazines from the last couple of years. Print Me a Stradivarius, the whole explosion of 3D printing, how to plug the internet into the human brain. And yes, there are labs right now working on cortical implants and optogenetics of how to actually plug the internet into your cortex, so you're plugged in 24/7. Now, for the guys here in the audience, I'm sure your wives are not going to like that, but, and for the women, well, I won't go there. But the fact of the matter is we are on the verge of connecting us, connecting all of us with the internet in the most intimate way that's going to connect each of us in an extraordinary fashion. And the final technology that's been making a massive debut is the whole field of artificial intelligence. So I don't know if you guys saw this. This is a game show called Jeopardy. It's a difficult game show of language nuance in which a category is stated and a comment is made, and you have to ask the question. And it's a game in which language nuance is important. Does Jeopardy show out up here in Toronto much? Yes? Okay, fantastic. It's Canadian in the first place? Alex. Oh, fantastic, okay. Well, thank you. Excuse my south of the border naivete on this. But the fact of the matter is, it's a hard game, and I suck at this. And IBM built a supercomputer called Watson, named after the founder of IBM. And to show how epic it was as an AI, it took on the top two all-time Jeopardy champions, the guy on the right who had won the most money and the guy on the left who had won the most number of games. And so Watson is a computer of around 300 or so servers in a box about 3 by 3 by 5 meters in size. It was not connected into the internet. It had downloaded Wikipedia. It was dependent only on what was in its memory banks, and it went up against these guys in the game of Jeopardy. What I want to show you is a clip for Watson, and this was a title I loved from PC Magazine, Watson Vanquishes Human Opponents, which gives you a clue of what happens. So we'll run first video.
Ken, you're in the first position. Please make a selection.
I've never said this on TV. Chicks dig me for 200, please, Jimmy.
Kathleen Kenyon's excavation of this city mentioned in Joshua showed the walls had been repaired 17 times. Watson.
What is Jericho?
Correct.
400, same category.
This mystery author and her archaeologist hubby dug in hopes of finding the lost Syrian city of Urkesh. Watson.
Who is Agatha Christie?
Correct. Watson.
Who is Mary Leakey?
You're right. Watson.
What is Crete?
Yes.
Let's finish Chicks Dig Me.
At Mount...
I swear they did that on purpose. I want you to imagine for a second Watson living on the cloud, an AI that any of us could tap into, could literally speak to on your cell phone, that had access to all the knowledge in the world and could process it by just a conversation. This is what's coming down the road, not 10 years from now, well within the next 5 or 6 years, where you can imagine Watson being available as your personal physician, Watson being available as your personal educator, as your employee, as your consultant. We're going to start to see AI pervasive in every aspect of our lives. Now, we might play with it on Siri on your phone, but that's just the beginning. You may think of it as Google when it completes the searches in the search bar. But we're going to start to see literally a software shell that you're going to give permission to read every email you send, to listen to every conversation that you have, to scan your DNA, to watch what you eat, to literally observe every aspect of your life. And you're going to do that because when you give it that permission, the value it's going to give you is so extraordinary. It's going to sort of like say, I've been monitoring your physiological parameters and your blood chemistries, Peter, and I made an appointment for the cardiologist for next week because I'm showing some microRNAs that show an impending heart attack, and I've taken the week after that off for you. I mean, is it invasive or is it supportive? Imagine having that level of intelligence available to complement and supplement your life. So all of this is made possible by what used to be the scarcest resource on the planet, large-scale computation. If I wanted to have access to 100 computers 20 years ago, it'd have to be the chairman of the computer science department here at University of Toronto or the chairman of a university around the world. Today, anyone in the middle of Bangladesh, in the middle of the Bronx, any place, can have access to 100 computers or 1,000 computers for a minute, a day, or a year. It's called cloud computing. And it's really the cost of electricity. This powerful technology is becoming more and more available. And this literally can unleash the creative power of individuals. Another technology coming down the road that we teach at SU is the whole field of robotics. So this is a robot called the PR2 that a friend of mine, Scott Hassan, one of the early Googlers, has committed $100+ million to developing. This is the ability to really enter the home and have a personal computer. Imagine this not only doing your laundry, but as we get older and older, having those robots take care of your aging parents. This is a robot called Big Dog. This is Cruelty to Robots. And I show that clip because I have an emotional reaction when I see that robot getting kicked. I don't know if you do as well, but we're going to start to see these robots entering every aspect of our lives. We're going to start seeing it at our home, as we get more and more octogenarians and centenarians. Right now, the reason that those people leave their homes and go to old age homes is because there's no one there to take care of them when they can't get out of bed for themselves or go to the bathroom. They don't want their kids changing their diapers. So we're going to start to see robots allowing people to have dignity and staying at home. As we start to have jobs lost from North America to China and India, we're going to start seeing those jobs lost to robots because the cost of electricity there is the same as the cost of electricity here. These robots are going to enter every aspect of how we live and how we work. Another kind of robot is this robot. It's Google's autonomous car. In the front seat is Larry Page, who I'm proud is one of my board members, Sergey Brin in the back, Eric Schmidt, one of our benefactors behind the car. And this autonomous robot is going to enter our lives throughout the world as well. So let me show you what this robot looks like. Here it is driving down University Boulevard in Palo Alto. On top of that car, you see that spinning device, which is a LiDAR, a laser imaging device. This has already been made legal in 3 U.S. states. The list is growing. It's driven over 300,000 miles. It's been in 2 accidents since that time, both times when a human driver was driving, not when the computer was driving. So I want to show you what that computer is seeing. So let's take a look. On top of that roof is that LiDAR. It's 64 lasers spinning around, generating 750 megabytes of data per second. Those lasers are seeing everything. Look at that image that's being generated. It's seeing every car, every person, everybody who drops a piece of litter, someone who opens a door. It is literally imaging the entire world around it everywhere. I want you to imagine tens of millions of, or at least millions of these cars on the streets. And what we're going to start to see is a time machine, where if you want to go back in time and see who entered the door of this business over here, or who was driving a car over there, you're going to be able to see it. Remember I said earlier, we're living in a time of data explosion. We haven't seen anything yet in a data explosion. Imagine the data that this is going to be generating. You're going to be able to know anything you want, anytime you want, anywhere you want, from the kinds of sensors that are going to become pervasive throughout our world. Another exponential technologies which is transforming our planet, is going to transform our total manufacturing base, is the field of 3D printing. This is the early stages of the Star Trek replicator. This is a device that can print anything out of literally 200 different materials. And the premier said we have a chocolate 3D printer in the exhibit, which I saw, which is fantastic. But imagine being able to print with plastics, glass, titanium, even human cells. Being able to print anything layer by layer by layer. So if you literally print a solid block of material, or print the same size block with 1,000 moving parts in between, it takes the same amount of time and costs the same money. Complexity comes for free. So does personalization. So what will these 3D printers create? Well, I'll give you an example. This is a polygon within a polygon within a polygon, 3D printed. So you can imagine large levels of complexity you can 3D print. These are titanium turbine blades. So we're starting to see a lot of 3D printed components for our aerospace industry, even our automotive industry. This is a photo booth in Japan, in which you step into the photo booth, you're scanned in about 10 seconds. Instead of getting a photo, you get a 3D figurine of yourself printed. Now, where is this going? Well, you're going to start to see Barbie dolls with your daughter's 3D face that was just scanned, printed on there, or G.I. Joe with your son. And in the future, these 3D printers are going to enter our lives in our desk drawer, in our closet. So when your kid sees a new toy they want, instead of having to wait, oh my God, 24 hours for Amazon to deliver it, you can hit print and have it printed for you right then and there. This is a gentleman who lost his right lower limb, scanned his left limb, flipped the image, and then 3D printed a composite prosthetic. This is a full-scale motorcycle 3D printed in the lobby of Autodesk up in San Francisco. And this is the future of home construction, where we're going to start to 3D print houses. So I was just giving a keynote to one of the largest clothing manufacturers in the world, and we're talking about where the future of this is going. And we're talking about the notion that, for the ladies in the audience today, if you have a gala event to attend tomorrow night, in the future you'll go home, you'll look online, you'll see a beautiful dress designed in Bangladesh that morning, you'll hit print, and you'll have it 3D printed in your closet, you'll wear it that evening, and then recycle it to print the next thing. Imagine, if you would, being able to have almost anything you want delivered at any time, anywhere. So companies who think of themselves as having supply chains as their distinguishing factor, or having supply depots or fleets of trucks, what happens when your supply is digital in the cloud and your differentiator is no longer valid? We're going to start to see a lot of transformation on this road to abundance. The final technology I'll talk about in this first part is synthetic biology. It's perhaps one of the most powerful technologies that exists today. This is a friend of mine, a business partner, Craig Venter, who in 2001 raced the National Institutes of Health to sequence the first human genome. He did this for $100 million in 9 months. Shortcut what was thought to be a multi-tens of billion dollar, multi-decadal process. In 2010, he shocked the world again when he created the first synthetic life form. Craig and his team, on their computer, laid out a 1.1 million base pair sequence of DNA with 4 letters, A, T, C, and G, the 4 letters of life. And they created this sequence of DNA that had what they considered to be the genes for the minimal set of what something needed to be alive, to be able to take photosynthetic light from the sun and create hydrocarbons, to be able to replicate itself, to be able to use that energy and stay alive. They took that computer file of 1.1 million base pairs, and they emailed the file to a company called Blue Heron that manufactured this DNA strand 1.1 million base pairs long. They sent them back a vial of this DNA strand by FedEx. They inserted that DNA into a blank cell, and that cell booted up for life. That is the first life form whose parents are an email file. That is the first life form where every single base pair was selected and directed by a human coder. You see, biology and synthetic biology is becoming the new programming language. High school kids today, college kids today are beginning to program in A, T, C's, and G's the same way they used to program in BASIC or Fortran or ones and zeros. We're going from a world of evolution by natural selection, Darwinism, to evolution by intelligent direction. Now, it may be scary for some. For others, it's exciting. Literally, we are beginning to say, a cell is a manufacturing plant. Let's have it manufacture this particular protein or this particular hydrocarbon, this particular octane molecule. We need this for new foods, new fuels, new vaccines. That's the future. In fact, one of our companies at a Singularity University right now has a Kickstarter campaign going on in which they're taking the luciferin gene out of fireflies and sticking it into plants so you can sort of light your garden at night. So let me pause here. This is the first part. These are the exponential technologies that are coming online. These are technologies that are not theoretical. These are technologies right here, right now, that are being experimented with at high school levels, at college levels, with the entrepreneurs here in the audience. They are the technologies that allow entrepreneurs to literally do what only governments and the multinational corporations could do in the past. So the question is, if people have that level of power, what should they do with it? Where do they focus their energy on? And you see, I'm someone who had my dream of flying into space. I grew up in the 60s, tail end of the 60s, watching Apollo and Star Trek and drinking all the Tang I can get my hands on to become an astronaut. And dreamt of that, and I've started about 15 companies to get there. One of my companies sends people to the space station. We've sent 8 clients up there. Our 9th client is Sarah Brightman. This opera singer is going up. Another one, we've done zero-G flights. We put Stephen Hawking up, as you heard in my introduction. Most recently, a company in the asteroid mining business I'll mention a little bit later. But I wanted to go, and I learned that my chances of becoming a NASA astronaut were like 1 in 1,000. I used to joke I had a better chance of becoming a basketball all-star than I did, an astronaut at 5'5", and that wasn't very high. And so I read one day about this man, Lindbergh. And I had no idea that in 1927, Charles Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic to win a prize. I thought he just woke up one day in New York and decided to fly to Paris. But that wasn't the case. It turned out that in 1919, a Frenchman by the name of Raymond Ortegue, who had moved from Paris to New York, had a dream about aviation. He said, if I can connect my old world to Paris, my new home of New York, that would change the world. And so he offered up a $25,000 prize in 1919 for the first team to make that flight. And as I read about this, I learned that 9 different teams spent $400,000 to try and win this guy's $25,000. And I'm like, oh my God, that's incredible. He doesn't back any of the losers. He only backs the winner. And he gets 16 times the money being spent. And so I said, wow, if I can create a prize to open up space, that would be amazing. The other thing I learned that was when Lindbergh made this flight across the Atlantic, it was such a dramatic demonstration of what was possible that the number of people buying tickets in North America went from 6,000 to 180,000, a 30-fold increase in the market. And imagine for the entrepreneurs here and the business people how you'd love to have a 30-fold increase in your market share. So I said, okay, if I can create a prize for spaceflight, maybe I can get all of those people empowered by those exponential technologies to build private spaceships. So my idea was the following. I said, okay, I'm going to create a $10 million prize. $10 million was enough money to attract the entrepreneurs, but not the Boeings and the Lockheeds. It had to be privately funded. To win the money, you'd have to build a spaceship that can carry 3 adults up 100 kilometers, land safely, and do it again within 2 weeks. The challenge was I didn't have $10 million. And, as entrepreneurs, don't we all know that story? Capital is scarce until you create it and make it abundant. So I moved to St. Louis, which is where Lindbergh got his capital, and began raising money on this bold and crazy dream. And most people said, that's crazy, it'll never work. And that let me know I was on the right track to some degree. And I was able to raise about $500,000 of seed capital. And with that seed capital, I undertook what was a bold decision, one that, when you're an entrepreneur, and you guys know this, or if you're a successful businessman, somewhere in your career, you took a big risk. Because you don't get success unless you believe in yourself and you're willing to take that risk. And the risk that I took was that I made a decision to announce the $10 million prize without having the $10 million. But I know that how you announce a big and bold idea really matters. You see, the world has a few ways that they will put you in their memory banks, depending on how they hear your idea. If you announce your idea in an uncredible fashion, they'll dismiss it out of hand. If you announce your idea above the line of super credibility, they'll believe and go, oh my God, how can I be involved? So my goal was to announce this idea in a super credible fashion. So I announced it under the arch in St. Louis, with 20 astronauts on stage with me, with the head of the FAA and the head of NASA by my side, with the Lindbergh family there. We announced this $10 million prize. Front page around the world, $10 million prize offered for private spaceflight. None of the media asked me, do you have any money? I did not. Do you have any teams? I did not. I wasn't lying about it, but I wasn't openly talking about the fact that we had to go raise the funds. And so I was absolutely confident who would not want to pay the $10 million after someone did the prize, right? I mean, it's like, you only pay upon success. How much better does it get than that? It's, it's guaranteed innovation. And so I set out merrily on my path. I went out and I met with Fred Smith, the head of FedEx. Fred, the FedEx X Prize, what do you think? I said, Peter, it's a great idea. But why isn't NASA doing this? Can anyone really pull it off? And the clincher was, isn't someone going to die trying? And I wasn't ready for that. You see, I forgot how risk-adverse most people are. And as an entrepreneur, I live on the edge of risk, as many of you do. And I also know that the day before something is truly a breakthrough, it's a crazy idea. If it wasn't a crazy idea, it wouldn't be a breakthrough. So I ask you, where in government, where in large corporations do we allow crazy ideas to be tried and be tested? From Fred Smith, I went and pitched Richard Branson twice, first for Virgin Atlantic, then for Virgin Mobile. I went out to 150 CEOs, CMOs, philanthropists, and was told no, 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 no. And if I could convey one key point to the entrepreneurs here, I did not give up because of one reason. It was my purpose in life. It was my mission. I was going to do this no matter whether someone paid me or not. And when I knew and I connected to that passion, at 3 o'clock in the morning when most people gave up, I kept going. And you know that passion if you've got it. So it was 2001, just turned 2001. I had 20 teams calling me saying, Peter, do you have the money? I did not. We're building our spaceship. Are you going to have the money ready? I said, trust me, I'll get it. And I remember exactly where I was when I read a copy of Forbes magazine in which I read about this woman and man, Anusha and Hamid Ansari, who were in Dallas, Texas, had built their third company called Telecom Technologies, which they sold to Sonos Networks for $1 billion. And In her bio, it said her dream was to fly on a suborbital flight into space. And I was like, my God, that's her. And I committed to myself, I'm going to track her down. And I did. She was vacationing in Hawaii for the last 2 months. I FedExed her materials. I was her first meeting when she got back, and they said yes on the spot. And we named it the Ansari X Prize in her honor. So, it was literally when you don't fail by not giving up. And for me, since it was my highest calling, I did, and incredibly, this prize worked again. We had 26 teams from 7 countries that spent $100 million going after this competition. Every single possible design had been looked at. And here we are on the morning of October 4th, 2004, in the middle of the Mojave Desert, where Spaceship One is nestled under the wings of White Knight 1. It had made a flight just 5 days earlier, and through the night, 30,000 people had driven in. You could see lights through the darkness of the desert for miles and miles. The vehicle took off, burning nitrous oxide, laughing gas, and polybutadiene tire rubber as its fuel. Here it is at altitude, and then the winning moment. And I love this. On the far left is Anusha and Amir Ansari next to myself. Next to me is Paul Allen, who funded Burt Rutan, next to him, the money to build the spaceship. Next to Burt is Brian Binney, the pilot, Auer Lindbergh. And next to Brian Binney is Richard Branson, who the week before the prize is won, comes in and negotiates the rights to the winning technology after turning me down twice. Well, and that's why he's Richard. He's amazing in his business sense. And I'm thankful he did that because he committed $250 million to commercializing this technology. We just didn't expect it to happen at the moment that the prize was being won. And he could have made my life a hell of a lot easier if he had just said yes, 5 years earlier. But we had 10 billion media impressions, front page around the world, made the homepage of Google. What I'd like to do is take you back there with a short video to show that winning moment. We're announcing today something called the X Prize, a $10 million contest to privately build a spaceship that's able to carry 3 individuals, fly to 100 kilometers altitude, and do that twice inside of 2 weeks.
I have never been myself as creative as I have eyeballing this goddamn prize.
Hello and welcome to Mojave here in the high desert of California on this incredible day. Now you are going to witness history in the making.
Release arm fire.
The Ansari X Prize inspired international competition, drove regulatory reform, and made history.
The X Prize for $10 million.
It ignited a
prize.
personal spaceflight revolution.
And now the winning vehicle, Spaceship One, is hanging in the Smithsonian right next to the Spirit of St. Louis that inspired it in the first place. It's literally like throwing yourself a touchdown pass. And I've got my ticket, and I'll fly on this in the next couple of years as soon as it becomes operational, and hopefully many of you will as well. So on the heels of that, we started thinking about how do we use incentive prizes to really solve the world's grand challenges? Because if you design a great incentive prize, you can get 10 to 40 times the prize money spent by the community trying to win it. You only pay the winner. It's efficient. You can spark a new industry, and you get non-traditional solutions. I went out and built a board of trustees I'm proud of. You heard some of the names before. And we are now launching X Prizes, incentive prizes, in a range of areas, in life sciences, in energy and the environment, in exploration, in learning and global development. So one of the prizes I launched last year, which I'm very proud of, is called the Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize. Qualcomm Foundation and Qualcomm Inc. are the sponsors of this. Paul Jacobs, the chairman and CEO of the Qualcomm Foundation, and I were on stage at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas announcing this last January. And this is a $10 million prize for the team that can build a handheld mobile device that any mom could use at 2 a.m. in the morning for herself or her kid to diagnose. It's not for a nurse, not for a doctor. It's for someone in the middle of Mumbai and someone in the middle of the Bronx, wherever you might be. It's a device that you can talk to because it's got Watson AI in the cloud, understands what you're saying, can look up anything about you. It's got lab on a chip. You can cough on it. It can do the RNA or DNA analysis, the pathogens in your sputum. You can do a finger blood prick in your blood chemistries. In success, this is a device that will literally be able to diagnose you better than a team of board-certified doctors. You see, I know the numbers for the United States. In the US, by 2020, the US is going to be short 120,000 doctors. You can't train enough doctors, build enough hospitals to take care of the demands. It's only through using these kinds of exponential technologies that you're going to meet the needs. So we announced this competition, and within the first year, we've had 250 teams, 16 of which from Canada, from 33 countries around the world competing for this already. We expect a winner in the next 3 years. Does it have to be a $10 million prize? It does not. If you guys remember the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico was going on, James Cameron, the producer and the oceanographer, had just joined our board. And he said, Peter, you've got to do something about this spill. It's decimating our coastline. So we looked at it and we said, you know, the technology for cleaning up oil spills has not changed in 20 years. The technology used to clean up the Exxon Valdez in Alaska was the same equipment used to clean up the spill in the Gulf. So we challenged teams to double the rate of oil spill cleanup. And we literally were blown away by the response. We had 350 teams from around the world that entered this competition. 10 finalists that got to the final stage of being able to compete in this world's largest oil spill cleanup facility. Of those 10, 7 of the 10 finalists, all entrepreneurs, all with companies ranging from 6 people to 50 people in size, not your multi-billion-dollar oil conglomerates. 7 of the top 10 teams doubled the oil spill cleanup rate. The winning team was able to increase it 600%. But what really got me was that one of the teams, one of those 7 teams that doubled the oil spill cleanup rate, was a team that had never been in the oil cleanup business. It was a team that first learned about this and met to talk about it in a Las Vegas tattoo parlor. I kid you not. You can't make stuff like this up. These guys, the tattoo artist was the designer. His customer funded it. They built a scale model in the guy's jacuzzi. And the first time it saw oil and water was in this facility. And it still doubled the oil spill cleanup rate. Let me show you what it looked like.
My full-time job back home is running a tattoo studio in Las Vegas.
We get asked all the time, we go, how long have you been in the oil industry? And well, counting today?
So one of the things that Incentive Prizes does, when you're looking for a needle in the haystack, it brings the great entrepreneurs to you. You know, I share with my good friend Dan Sullivan, who runs Strategic Coach here in Ontario, a passion for finding the greatest entrepreneurs and incentivizing them. Dan teaches them, I incentivize them. And if we can incentivize them to take on the world's grand challenges, no matter who they are, give them a platform to show their stuff. Because sometimes the expert is the person who can tell you exactly how it can't be done. And what you need is the person who's completely naive, has no restrictions, who comes and goes, well, why not this way? And you have a true breakthrough that comes out of it. So where are we going next? One of the prizes I'm excited about moving forward is global literacy. Today, we live in a world of 880 million illiterate people, people who cannot read or write. 10% of those are kids. So Nicholas Negroponte, the founder of the Media Labs, One Laptop Per Child, is the chairman. Sir Ken Robinson and Prime Minister Gordon Brown, the vice chairman. We are working right now to launch perhaps our most important X Prize ever by the end of the year. This would be a software competition to create a piece of software that would teach a child who is completely illiterate how to read and how to code, focused on kids aged 6 to 9 in the developing world. This is a prize that's half funded. We have 2 main benefactors, and we're working to find the rest. But in success, we'll launch this year, and hopefully within 3 or 4 years, have a wave of literacy come across this planet. Since I live in California, I'm working on an Earthquake Prediction X Prize. And one of my favorites is an organogenesis X Prize. Go from a skin cell to a transplantable heart, liver, lung, or kidney. Now, I don't know how many of you know somebody who's had to have an organ transplant, but I want you to imagine 10 years from now when any of us, all of us, can have a set of spare backup organs. How barbaric will it seem that you used to have to wait for someone to die before you can have an organ transplant? Pretty crazy, huh? But this isn't mythical. This is where we're going. We're on the edge of this technology right now. We're working on an Alzheimer's X Prize, childhood obesity, brain-computer interface, and a range of different areas. You can learn more about it at just xprize.org. So it's been my purview from running X Prize and Singularity University to see the extraordinary rate of technological progress going on that has me understanding and believing we're heading towards a world of abundance. And I'm going to start with a small story and close with a story of abundance. And then we'll go to some Q&A, which is your perspective matters. If you think that things are scarce, change your perspective. So as we talk about perspective, one of the companies I just co-founded is a company called Planetary Resource. We are actually looking to go out and mine asteroids for precious materials. To go out there to find the platinum group metals, the nickel, the iron, the fuels that are available, because if you think about the Earth is a crumb in a supermarket filled with resources. Sometimes those resources hit the Earth, and that's not a good thing. We had just last year this massive impact over Russia with 30 times the force of the Hiroshima nuclear explosion. But one of the benefits of having the ability to go out and mine asteroids is the ability to actually see them coming and protect the Earth. So there are literally millions of these, 600 million, about 1.5 million greater than the kilometer in size, some thousand or so we know that come near the Earth. And what I want to show you is we announced this story just last year. We've been working on this backed by a group of 12 billionaires to go out and make this happen. We announced this story just last year on one of the most important news channels in the world, in my estimation, on Jon Stewart. And let me show you a short clip.
Roll 212! This may seem like science fiction, but today a group of space pioneers announced plans to mine asteroids for precious minerals.
Space pioneers going to mine asteroids for precious materials! Boom, boom! Yes! Stu Beef is all in! Do you know how rarely the news in 2012 looks and sounds how you thought news would look and sound in 2012? The best part, there's no government boondoggle. This asteroid retrieval project is being completely handled by eccentric billionaires.
They are some of the most influential and wealthiest men on the planet. Google's Larry Page and Eric Schmidt, director James Cameron, X Prize founder Peter Diamandis, and billionaire Ross Perot Jr.
If you put two Google billionaires with a Microsoft billionaires and some astronauts together, you can't go wrong.
I think they had my bank account a little bit off by a few orders of magnitude. But what are in these asteroids? First of all, fuels, hydrogen and oxygen. It turns out that carbonaceous chondrites, a 75-meter asteroid, rather small in size, has enough hydrogen and oxygen to have fueled all 135 space shuttle missions. These asteroids will literally bag them, remove the volatiles, reconsolidate, recondense, and will fuel humanity's expansion out to the solar system. LL chondrites, a 500-meter LL chondrite has more platinum and platinum group metals than mined in the history of humanity. In fact, it turns out that all the platinum on Earth actually sunk to the core. When we're mining on the surface of the Earth, we're mining past asteroid impact sites. So, one of the first asteroids, as an example, we'll go after that's here. I mean, it's got a $5 trillion asset value. Now, my game plan is I'm going to buy puts on the platinum market, announce the mission, fund the mission, and go and grab it. I'll mention we have a big announcement coming up this Wednesday. If you're interested, just planetaryresources.com. But we are building what we call the Imperial probe droids. In fact, we name our spacecraft Arkid after the company in the Star Wars universe, Arkid Industries, that built the Imperial probe droids. So we're going out, we're excited about what we're doing, and it's really a change in perspective. So when I talk about abundance, I wrote this book. I'm proud of it. We were able to get on the New York Times list for 9 weeks. And I go out and I speak to people, and I talk about the fact that the world is getting better at an extraordinary rate, that we're heading towards a world of abundance. And when I'm out in most audiences, perhaps not this one, people say, really? I mean, Peter, haven't you heard about, the economic crisis in Europe and the gun shootings here and the problems we're having? How can you possibly say we're heading into a world of abundance? And I say, wow, where'd that come from? I remember this one couple living, it was in a coffee shop talking about whether it was morally right to bring their child into the world, into this world. And it hit me that, ladies and gentlemen, we're living during a day and age where the news media is a drug pusher, and negative news is their drug. And on every device that we have, our smartphones, our tablets, our radios, our TVs, our newspapers, we are being bombarded over and over again by negative news in high definition throughout the night and day. And you see, there's a reason for this. As we were evolving on the plains of Africa, on the savannas of Africa, again, hundreds of thousands and millions of years ago, if you missed a piece of good news back then, well, that's too bad. But if you missed a piece of bad news, it was your life. A rustle in the leaves that you thought was the wind, but it was a tiger, you were out of the gene pool. And so we all evolved an ancient piece of our temporal lobe called the amygdala. And the amygdala scans everything you see and everything you hear first, and it looks for bad news. You hear a piece of bad news, you go, oh my God, what was that? And you pay immediate attention, right? When you hear it on the news, you hear the Dow's plummeting or whatever the case might be. But you have to ask yourself the question, why does that go on? Well, the news media knows about the amygdala. And the old saying, if it bleeds, it leads. So 10 times to 1, you have negative news to positive. You just open up any newspaper. But is the world really that way? And I would posit it's not. You see, over the last 100 years, the human lifespan has more than doubled. The per capita income for every nation, adjusted by inflation, has more than tripled. The cost of food has come down 13-fold. Energy is reduced 20-fold. Transportation, 100-fold. Communications, over 1,000-fold. Steven Pinker at Harvard just published a book showing us that we're living during the most peaceful time ever in human history. But you wouldn't know that just reading the news. Our chances of dying a violent death are 1/500th of what they used to be. You see, what's caused this amazing transformation in humanity? It isn't just luck. It's not brilliant politicians, although some may take the claim. It is, in fact, the march of technology. It's the work that you're doing. See, technology is a resource-liberating force. And while the last 100 years have been incredible, the next 100 years are going to literally blow them away. So I opened my book, Abundance, with a short story about this guy, Napoleon III, who's inviting the King of Siam over for dinner at the Palace of Versailles. And to demonstrate his wealth, Napoleon feeds all of the troops with silver utensils. Napoleon himself eats with gold utensils, and the King of Siam is fed with aluminum utensils. You see, in 1840, aluminum was the most precious metal on the planet. Even though the Earth is 8.3% aluminum by weight, you can't go into the ground and dig up pure aluminum. It doesn't exist in a pure form. It's all bound with oxygen and silicates to form bauxite, this clay-like substance. And it was so energetically difficult to extract the aluminum from the bauxite, it was worth more than gold and platinum. Which, by the way, if you go to Washington, D.C., the tip of the Washington Monument, the capstone is aluminum because it was built in that same decade. And then this technology called electrolysis came along that made it so easy to extract the aluminum from bauxite. We now use aluminum with a throwaway mentality. It's abundant. And so I ask you the question, what else in our lives today do you think of as scarce that technology will make abundant? Energy, for one. We live on a planet that is bathed in 5,000 times more energy from the sun than we use as a species in a year. 5,000 times more. It's not there, it's just not yet in a usable form. But there's great news. We're in the middle of an explosion of production of solar at the same time that exponentially reducing in price. Talk about water wars and water scarcity. We live on a water planet. You know, yes, 2/3 of Earth is covered by water, and 97.5% of that is salt water, 2% of the polar ice caps, and 0.5% is a clean drinking water. But there are extraordinary breakthroughs coming down the pike in nanomaterials, or my friend Dean Kamen's slingshot technology, which Coca-Cola is on the verge of deploying to 200+ countries around the world. This Maasai warrior in the middle of Kenya on a cell phone, as I mentioned, has better mobile comm than the premier or the president did 30 years ago, and on Google has access to more knowledge and information than the president or premier did 15 years ago. And if they're on a smartphone with free apps, what do they have? They have video teleconferencing, they have Skype, they have, you know, GPS, things that would have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars for. We talked about the tricorder giving us abundant health and global literacy, creating a wave of literacy on this planet. The last set of slides I want to show you is what I consider one of the most important ones. This is population growth. We've just crossed the 7 billion mark on this planet. This is internet penetration. In 2010, we had just shy of 2 billion people connected on the planet. By 2020, that number is growing to 5 billion. What does that mean? In the next 7 years, 3 billion new minds are entering the global conversation. These are 3 billion new innovators, 3 billion people who are going to pour tens of trillions of dollars in the global economy. What will they invent? What will they consume? How will they change our lives? If they're not your customer, they're your customer's customer. They represent a transformation in this world. You see, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we are at an epic age. We are just at the very beginning of the greatest period of innovation ever. My goal is to help people understand this world of abundance we're coming into. One of my goals I set this year was to get out and give away 100,000 copies of my book, Abundance, to help people understand where it's going. What I want to do is offer any of you who would like a copy of this keynote or would like a copy of the book. I just got a local text number. You can jot the number down, and I'll happily send you both a copy of the book and of this presentation. Just text me your first name and your email address, and we'll go from there. Folks, we are about to enter an epic period of time, a time where we can make our dreams come true, where entrepreneurs are going to create a world that we are proud to live in. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Diamandis. That was inspiring, energetic, positive, perfect for our keynote speaker today. We have about 10 minutes for the audience to ask you some questions, so I'm going to open up the floor for that, and we'll take it from there. So I believe there are microphones that people can go to.
Yeah, we have 2 microphones right.
There's a couple of microphones, so we have somebody right here.
Sure.
Hi, Peter. Jay Godsell, CEO of Solarship. We're a cross between a bush plane. Canada, Ontario specifically is the king of the bush plane globally, and airships, and that's not something that we're very good at yet. Ontario's ranked 18 out of 20 communities in North America for investing in its own, so it's not really it's a great place for innovation, but it's kind of like baby cheetahs. They get killed very early in the early stages, but once they get up and running, they're tough to catch. So given that context in Ontario, I'm sure I speak for a lot of entrepreneurs in the room, there's a curiosity about your quest and what you've learned now, and what would be your #1 piece of advice if you know you have a breakthrough that works, but you're in an environment that's really difficult? What would be your one piece of advice?
So first of all, as a fellow pilot, bush flying is the most exciting and perhaps the most challenging in the world. So first of all, it really is about community. I think one of the most important things, one piece of advice is join Dan Sullivan's Strategic Coach, but that's a different part. It's about community. It's about finding fellow entrepreneurs. One of my friends, Philip Rosedale, who is the creator of Second Life, actually did a search to find out which communities have the greatest level of entrepreneurial success. And what he found was that it was the communities that have the highest density of entrepreneurs. And it turns out if you look at cities around the world, like Dallas has 30 entrepreneurial founders per 100,000 people. New York is twice that at 60. Silicon Valley is 10 times that at 300. And it turns out that entrepreneurs are much more open with their ideas. You innovate by exchanging ideas back and forth. So how you can create a critical density of entrepreneurs so you can share ideas, innovate, bounce ideas off, because it really is in that conversation with fellow entrepreneurs that you create you get past your own breakthroughs. And I think one of the advantages that you have working with the Centers of Excellence here is perhaps to create those high-density entrepreneurial exchanges, but then also the web allowing you to connect with entrepreneurs around the planet. It's really being free and open in your communications and really bouncing ideas back and forth, because to come up with a breakthrough in your own mind is really difficult. And that's where it happens in conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have somebody on my far left.
Sir.
Yes, Peter, thanks for that inspiring speech. My name is Murray McKercher from the Mobile Institute. And in 1989, a gentleman by the name of Martin Cooper and I spoke about something called mobile data. And Martin told us, Martin Cooper is generally known as the person who invented the cellular telephone. And Martin told me that we were talking about mobile data, and he said it's going to take 20 years for what we're talking about to happen. And I've been waiting, and it's actually 20. He was absolutely dead on with the 20-year mark. I'm just curious on your opinion with respect to, is that time frame now shrinking?
So I heard most of your question. I think that one of the things that people don't realize is the rate at which innovation is going to be accelerating. And it's accelerating at a pace much faster than we can understand and conceive of. And there are a number of reasons for this. Innovation occurs principally in the exchange of ideas between people. It doesn't happen with you sitting by yourself and sometimes happening sitting by yourself and tinkering. Most of the times it's an exchange of ideas. And what's happening is that people are moving out of the rural areas into cities. And so the density of people is increasing. The internet is connecting all of us. But what's also happening is we have as I showed you, 3 billion new people coming online. And those 3 billion people now have access to what? Cloud computing, 3D manufacturing, artificial intelligence. Even you can code in synthetic biology, have it manufactured and sent to you. So we're going to have 3 billion new innovators who are scrapping and creating, innovation also occurs under very constrained situations. I talk about not thinking out of the box. I think about thinking in very small constrained boxes. When you're hyper-constrained is where you innovate. So the mobile phone is the principal mechanism by which this explosion in innovation is going to happen. In a rate, I was with Astro Teller, who runs Google X, Google's internal skunk works, and Steve Jurvetson, one of the top venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, and we're talking about the notion that the rate is increasing so fast that it's going to become literally a blur.
Okay, back to the center, Mike.
Yeah, hi. My name is Raju Guteti from Citizen Center. I wanted to ask you a question on a social innovation side. Excuse me. Now, you have talked about so many innovations, but between people and people, right, in the area where politics and people, and how do people get in touch with politicians? And everybody's trying to figure out how they want to be able to live more better in their lives, right? What kind of an X Prize do you think would be possible in this area?
So that's a great question. First of all, when we are looking at X Prizes, we're looking at things which a relatively small team of graduate students can do. Overthrow governments is kind of hard for them as a project. But I want to remind you of this concept of linear to exponential organizations. And there is nothing more linear than government. And one of the difficulties I project in government is that the rate of change is going to be so fast that government's not going to be able to regulate it, and that's going to make them very difficult and very nervous. So I speak to Peggy Hamburg, who runs the Federal Drug Administration, the Food and Drug Administration in the United States. I say, Peggy, when my cell phone becomes my physician, are you going to regulate it? And the answer is, why, yes, we have to. At which point I say, well, then the tricorder is going to probably come into existence in Africa and not in the US. You're going to see greenfield. So there is, in fact, a lot of experimentation taking place in governments around the world which direct democracy, where, I mean, if you can do your banking online and your other things online, why can't you do democracy online? And so I think we're going to start to see more governments sort of changing because they're going to fail in this rate of rapid change. I mean, I just want to be very clear. I'm not trying to promote anarchy or predict negative things, but when things are changing so rapidly, it's hard for large institutions and infrastructure to keep up with it. And if you try, things break.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and we'll go back to the other mic.
Hi, Peter. My name is Mark Burden. I have a independent consulting company called Cloud Worker Solutions, and I also work with Startup Canada, which is a community for entrepreneurs. When you were talking about community before, I thought I should mention Startup Canada. But Ontario and Canada in general is very strict on crowdfunding, and I was wondering if we might be able to borrow from your X Prize and maybe create a series of C prizes or O prizes and have those as replacements for X prizes to have an alternative way to do crowdfunding. So
I'm sorry to hear that Canada is restrictive on crowdfunding. I think it's one of the most important innovations in capital ever in terms of increasing the velocity of capital. I mean, that is to your own detriment, and I would just urge you to lobby hard. Last year in 2012, there was $2.8 billion worth of crowdfunding in various forms. By 2015, it'll be $15 billion. So when you talk about, the province providing venture capital in the amounts of tens of millions of dollars, just pass a law, and the world will provide you capital in the forms of billions of dollars. It's really about, the notion of creating we now have the technology, again, AI, cloud computing, 3D printing, all those things to make your dreams come true, and the crowdfunding is a founding mechanism to make your dreams come true. It's a direct financial engine of manifesting the future you want. So that's the first thing I would do. I would get on the bandwagon, everybody go for it. But second to that, I do believe that incentive competitions, and we at the X Prize Foundation, we haven't really publicly announced it. We've created a for-profit spin-out called Fix, and I think the URL is fixhq.com. But we're creating a platform where people who have a problem that they want locally fixed can put up a bounty, have a prize designed around it, and then launched. So we'll hopefully create a mechanism for local prizes where you can have problems and problem solvers coming together to create a solution. I'm writing my next book, which is called Bold, How to Make Your Dreams Come True and Solve the World's Grand Challenges, on this whole field of crowd empowerment, right? Exponential organizational tools. And I am thrilled by the future that this is going to be created. It's the most powerful tool since the printing press for changing the world. Anyway, thank you all so very much for your time.
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you, Peter. Clearly, we chose the right person to launch us into discovery. Peter, you have inspired us with your message about the importance of creative thinking and innovation in our world, and your belief that we are all capable of making a big difference, and anything is possible. So, before we open the doors, I've been given a note that because we're running a little late, and nobody had the nerve to pull Peter off the stage, The panel discussions will now start a few minutes later at 4:10. So I'm pleased to now announce the opening of the Discovery show floor, and I look forward to seeing you all at this evening's reception. Thank you very much.